Willow Creek Springs presents Healthy Living with your host, Joe Grumbine.
Well, hello and welcome back to the Healthy Living Podcast. I am Joe Grumbine, your host, and I'm kind of tickled today because we have a returning guest that has shared a number of episodes with us, and we haven't seen in a little while, and now she's back. We have Erin Wilkins. Welcome back.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
Awesome. The sun is starting to shine. I feel that spring is coming. I'm excited.
But I think it's back a year ago that we began this journey together, and we were just talking about the spring coming out when we got into discussions about electroculture and honeybees and all the other cool things that we have done and talked about along the way, dance therapy and soul fragment healing and so many different conversations. And life gets busy. Life is trying and challenging, and that's one of the reasons that we do this show, is so that when we come into obstacles, when we come into trials or seemingly insurmountable issues, that when you look and you see, oh, there's somebody else who's already done that, or there's already somebody else who's going through that, or, oh my God, they've got it so much worse. It puts things back into perspective, and it gives us some of that that juice to carry on. And maybe that's a good topic, because we all are going through stuff. And I've been involved with alternative medicine, if you will, for most of my life. And it's interesting because some of the people you work with, it's obvious that they need help. They got some visible ailment, problem, issue, and others you look at, and I remember when I was doing my medical cannabis dispensary over almost 15 years ago. We catered to a lot of elderly people and people that were going through cancer treatments, and all the time I had people say, well, they don't look sick. And I always said to myself, then, if you would just sit down and talk to them and hear about what their problems and issues are, so many times people would go, oh, wow, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. And I think that a lot of especially me as a man, when the age I grew up in, it was, suck it up, be a man, right? And there's no reason to let anybody know your weaknesses, because they're just going to exploit them anyway. So we walk around with shields up and smiles on, and everything's great, selfie stick in hand, and woo, look at me. And in the inside, we're going, oh, I don't know if we're going to make it. and I think that so many of these things happen, and I think that that's a good reason for a show like this, or a project like this to exist, is that people can, share what's really happening. And I've even have a subscription only element to this, when people really want to get graphic and really go deep and be transparent. And there's a way people can support that too. But frankly, it's just a place where we can come and talk. And so you deal with a lot of people, a lot of different issues, ailments, and you rely on your intuition and your senses to, I don't know, maybe discover what's really bringing somebody to you. So why don't you tell me a little bit about some of the issues where people, they come for a broken fingernail, and you're looking at them going, really? Because I know you're missing a foot down there and you're not mentioning it, or obviously a play on words. But why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I mean, just to kind of second what you were saying, I think that in our current society in America, unfortunately, we're trained to just put a sheen over everything. I mean, you see that just with a hi, how are you? I'm fine. Well, really, is everybody you say that to really fine? No, they're not.
Right.
But they don't take the time to say, no, there's something going on. And I think that's where I'm so blessed, is having people that come to me saying, I'm not fine, but I don't exactly know what it is. And then just going in from a, gosh, it could be physical, it could be mental, it could be spiritual, it could be so many things. But looking over that as the whole person. I actually had a gal come to me last week, and she came for a soul fragment healing, and we've been working through that. She's now to the point where she doesn't struggle with depression any longer, doesn't
Nice.
need to be on meds, is able to express that creative side of her that was always, pushed down. But she came and she said, oh my gosh, Erin, I think you need to fix my back too while I'm here, because my back is out of alignment. It's really, really hurting. And I just energetically took a look at it, and I said, that's not your back out of alignment. That's because you're doubting yourself. And
Wow.
her yellow chakra was completely out of whack, and we pulled that off, and her back immediately felt better.
Wow.
And it was not even a physical thing at all. And I think if you had gone to a normal doctor and said, my back hurts, have some drugs, and it would never have touched the
Exactly.
issue.
And you never get to the bottom of it ever. Yeah.
Nope.
That's kind of a recurring theme. And we started talking about when initially one of our first episodes was about allergies and causes of things. And I am sorry, I'm cursed with this brain that doesn't forget things sometimes. So I go back and refer to things. You're like, oh yeah, we did, didn't we? But the point is, causation is what caused a problem. I wish medical science would like focus on that instead of how do we put a cover over it and make it feel better. And pain is for a reason, right? I mean, that's the whole idea. Pain's like your referee inside going, hey guys, hurry up, we got a problem here, we don't want to break this thing, so let's stay off it for a while, or recognize or deal with. And sometimes the signal gets reflected onto something else. And so even though it might have started here, or even more difficulty, it might have started in your psyche, which is harder to define. Like, where is it,
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, I'm in the back today, I might be in your foot tomorrow, but here I am right now. And like you just said, you go to the doctor and they have sort of a one script answer for everything. And it's like, well, okay, here's the drug we need for you, instead of, well, what's the problem? Like, why don't we fix it? And so getting to the bottom of things, identifying the source of an issue, whether it's a physical ailment or a spiritual ailment or a mental ailment, doesn't really matter what causes it. Getting to the bottom is important. And maybe as important as it can, it's not just about feeling better, it's about getting better, or maybe preventing getting hurt worse, so you get pain so that you don't go back and hurt that thing. That's really the whole point of it, right? Because maybe you can walk on it. You hear about stories about people, hiking out of the canyon with a broken leg, and you can endure through pain and get through it. But what did you do to that injury? You destroyed it, you mashed it. Now it's a whole nother level. And that was what the pain was trying to get you to do. And I think your heart and your soul does the same thing. It's like, hey, don't destroy me. I'm pretty important, leave me alone, or let me solve this issue, or deal with what's hurting me.
Yeah, no, and we're taught to run from pain, that pain's a negative thing, that fever is a negative thing. And I always say your body's telling you something, it's communicating with you, and any drugs that you're taking are just gonna smash your ability to figure out what's going on. And obviously if you're in extreme pain, you can take something, but for goodness sakes, figure out what the source is first, before you dampen your body's ability to communicate with you.
So when people come to you, I mean, you're out there in a lot of arenas where people know to find you, and whether it's through your website or whatever it is you're doing, somebody comes to you and says, hey, I heard maybe you can help me. Like, when you go to a doctor, they'll have a little questionnaire to fill out, and it'll ask you your medical history, and it relies on you to tell the truth. And,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have any way to know, like medical records aren't connected. Like if you think, oh, well, I'm in this system, there's no system. I mean, there's internal systems in different healthcare systems where they could look. If you're stay with the same insurance provider, they could probably tell you your history. But if
Yeah.
you're like most people, you spend your lifetime bouncing around doing different things, and we don't stay on one program all our life. There's no way in hell any new doctor I went to visit today would know anything about my medical history unless I told him. And, so what do you do to try to glean from, somebody? Obviously, they're going to come to you with what they want you to know, but,
Yeah.
but where do you go from there?
Yeah, I had a really good example. This was last weekend. So I had a gentleman that he buys duck eggs from me, but then
Mhm.
he also knows what I do. So
Right.
he says, "Hey, I'm having this problem with my eye. My eye won't stop twitching." So I went to the doctor. They gave me steroids, and I don't think I'm doing very good. So I had him come over, and we just played off of that. When is this twitching? What happened right before it started? Just a few simple questions. Come to find out, he wasn't vaccinated, was around some children that were vaccinated with COVID driving a bus, picked up the spike proteins. It triggered an immune reaction within him, which then got treated with steroids, which then
Wow.
caused a heavy metal overload,
Wow.
fueled by things that he was eating. Because I said, you are eating something that is fueling this reaction and this response. And so
Yeah.
we went through some muscle testing on some things that he should not be intaking. We did a foot detox to pull all the heavy metals out of his body from the steroid. And then I just did kind of a quick neck adjustment, and that was good. So it was
Nice.
interesting because we were able to hit it from a detox, nutrition, as well as just an osteopathic alignment
Right.
center.
And that's
So
what's important for people to realize, I think, too, is like, a lot of times people like me that have issues with a lot of medical practices and politics, if you will. But I'm not against Western medicine. I
yeah,
just think that there's a place for it with
yeah,
everything. And I'm not one of these guys that's anti anything. I'm pro what works, and I don't really care what it is.
yeah.
And I just don't have those filters that say, well, if you do this, you can't do that. I'm like, well, I don't know, maybe you can.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, I think that I think it's really important to consider these things as we're going forward and talking about it. So, in this case, it's I think of practitioners of all kinds. So that sort of covers everybody from, the dabbling herbalist to the, board certified physician. They're all
Mm-hmm.
practitioners. Everybody's a practitioner. Otherwise you don't qualify. And
Yep.
so, just, I have to wonder, you're like a detective, or we're all like a detective in the sense of, you get presented with an issue, a problem, and then it's your job to figure out how to solve it. Well, there's generally clues along the way, and
Mm-hmm.
you generally have tools to interpret those clues. And I think
Yep.
that, unfortunately, my experience with Western medicine more often than not is like, you ever see one of those trace it kits where, like, you're going to paint this painting, so you just overlay the thing on top of it, you draw it
Mm-hmm.
out, and then you have to
Yeah.
follow that line or it won't give you that thing.
Yeah.
And it's like they have their little trace it kits that say, okay, you tell them what's in there, and then they put the little thing over the top of it, and if it doesn't quite fit, well, they just scribble it in anyways, and it will do that. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times a treatment can mask a symptom to make you feel better. So then you feel like it's
Yep.
good, right? I mean, I feel better, so it's good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And steroids are a great example of that. I got diagnosed, I don't know, almost 15 years ago with a allergy to a certain type of fungus spores. And I had walked around with walking pneumonia for almost 10 years prior to that, coughing and discharging goo out of my lungs because I was allergic to this stuff and I didn't know about it. And plus all various and sundry other reasons that I've attacked my own body. But the point was, once they figured it out, that was sort of the cookie cutter answer for it. And he says, well, we've got some experimental antifungal medication that I could put you on, but if it works for you, it's going to cost you, $6,000 a month. And I'm like, well, that's not going to work. Or we got a cheaper answer and it'll probably work. And guess what? It's prednisone, a very common cheap steroid that really works great for certain things.
Yeah.
In a short term. And even like if you take it for poison oak, they have a 2-week titration where they give it to you and then you scale off of it until you're done and then you're good to go. Well, poison oak's a temporary issue. Chronic bronchial pulmonary aspergillosis is not. And so every time I come in contact with these spores, the pneumonia wants to set in again. And so their answer was, well, get on this stuff, get yourself cleared out and stay on a maintenance dose. And then there's long-term issues with those things. I gained 50 pounds. I had all kinds of issues and it worked. It caused that to come out and be clear and all of that. But then now you got to deal with all this. Fast forward, 20 years, I ended up creating a formula that works great. Now I take no steroids and I lost the 50 pounds and I still don't have, I still am mindful of the issue where what causes it. And when I get exposed to that thing that causes me problems, I go and I take more of my own formula that solves it. But other than that, it's great, but that was a lot of detective work and it took me like 6 doctors to even get a diagnosis, much less a treatment. And so who does that except for crazy people that are, determined to get to the heart of things. And so we need people like you that are willing to get to the heart of things. And I'm just, always eager to hear, your I don't know, your SOPs, like how do you find your way to those answers, and I know a lot of it's intuition and experience, so you can't necessarily put it all into words, but some of it you can.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the medical background helps because I can see, what someone's gonna be prescribed, what, this potential side effects that could cause. And so that's good to have. And then some of it's just, when people give me permission to look into their soul room or do energy work on them, I think that's where I gain the most of it because it's them opening up and sharing that part that most people just try to cover up. And when that happens, it's like a floodgate. So
Right.
I had a gal that was having awful stomach pains and she just says, Erin, I don't know what's going on. Can you just get this off of me? So I just started doing some energy work on her and we pulled the pain off. But then I said, something happened when you were 16 years old and you haven't forgiven yourself for it. You need to deal with that or it's going to keep coming back. And so it's just stuff like that where try to find, I'll help you solve the issue, but then let's get to the root so that you don't have it come back. And that was just for her allowing me to join her, on her energetic journey towards healing.
And, it's interesting because we live in this crazy world now where there's so many more problems than there was in, let's just say, simpler times. But in simpler times, there were different problems that we don't have now too. So, you think to yourself, people are like, oh yeah, it would have been so great to live 1,000 years ago. It's like, well, yeah, except for the cholera and all of the things that killed everybody, that we don't have that problem anymore. So, and people that have issues with vaccine, which I'm generally one of them, but there's also a place for that type of a treatment. People used to die from things that we don't die from anymore. And so, that was before there was any politics in medicine, there was no medicine. And so you got to think to yourself, okay, a lot of times extremists want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And that's where the problem with extremists always is. And that's the problem with our country and the world right now, is everybody's polarized themselves to a place where common sense doesn't get to exist. And inside of your crazy theories, there's some truth. And inside of your opposite crazy theories, there's some truth. So why don't we go and find the place where they go both live? But now you're living in such a complicated world. So when somebody comes to you, not only do they have the traumas that you're now aware of that 1,000 years ago nobody even considered, or maybe some shaman or spiritual healer would have had the sense to do those things, but outside of that, it wasn't mainstream anywhere. So, and then now we have all these other complications like forever chemicals and ultra processed foods and drugs that are in our water, and what drugs that are in our food, and drugs that are in our medicine chests and everything else. And then complicated all by a combination of 10,000-year-old traditions that can't be stopped because they exist and you can't unknow something. And then modern medicine that's now sponsored by the pharmaceutical companies that want you to buy their shit.
Exactly. Yep.
And you got to deal with all of it. So all of these allergies, all of the, the traumas. I don't know if traumas are worse today than they were before. You look at the violence that happened in ancient times, and trust me, you'd think we're living in a Disney movie today. But at the same time, we have toxins and poisons and environmental concerns that nobody would have ever dreamed of, 1,000 years ago. And so how do you look at it? Like, it's going from a little, 2-octave keyboard to a concert organ with 1,700 octaves of different notes to play.
Yeah, I mean, I try to simplify everything because I think we do live in a world that tries to complicate everything. And when you break things down to the bare minimum, I mean, we're a heart, mind, body, soul, and spirit. Each individual's different. Yeah, and that hasn't changed.
Right.
It is. We all have struggles and trials, and I think modern medicine tries to treat all of humanity all at once. Yeah. I try to look at each person, and you are your own little universe within yourself, and that's what I try to treat. And it breaks it down into more simpler building blocks, because it shouldn't be complicated. Healing, I mean, we're innate healers. We're created in the image of the great healer, and so
that's already built into us. Like all the formula for fixing us is already in our genetic code. Like your body knows how to make a whole new body.
Oh, yeah.
It does every 7 years. So that's part of the deal is I think, and that's really important, that one of the lessons that I try to get out of this show is the answers are right there. They're in the food you eat. They're in your body knows it, even though you don't know how to do it. It does, and you don't have to. And it's unlocking that, maybe getting those obstacles out of the way. I think that's, like you just talked about, a blockage. Like, anybody ever have a real bad pimple or an abscess or something like that, or even a tooth that's infected, and it's a splinter. I mean, what you name it, and it's just like it builds up in pressure, and then it starts to hurt and get hot and all of these things, and then finally you remove the thing that was blocking it, and all this nasty goo comes out, and then you feel better. And I think a lot of times maybe even just the ability to identify that blockage. You think about a bowel obstruction or a kidney stone or any of these things that are horrible and life-threatening. They're nothing but a blockage, right? Yeah. Just something in the way, and all of a sudden, if you can get rid of it, life gets real good real fast.
Yep.
So how about you? It's been now a good 6 months since we've been on the show together, and tell me about you.
Things are good. I'm learning to remove the blockages as well. I mean, we never stop growing, we never stop changing, and we never stop healing. And so it's just been more little stepping stones on my path towards healing and towards drawing boundaries.
Yeah.
learning what actually limits you and what helps you to grow and be fruitful, and then going towards those things. So my life lately has been a lot of pruning the
Mhm.
parts of my branches that were not causing fruit to grow, and then fertilizing the things that do. And a lot of times fertilizer is stinky and it's messy, but it also
But it
will
works.
cause the goodness to come out. So just going through that, learning to say no, probably has been my biggest thing, because I am a healer and I want to give, but there's been times when I've had to say, I can't, because I don't have enough in my cup to water you too. And that's been the best thing for me to realize, like, it's okay. Because that just causes burnout. And then there's no one to help me, and I'm not there to help anybody else. And so that's been my journey lately, and it's been good. It's been really good.
That is some of the best advice that, there's been a recurring theme. I could echo that. I spent the last 2 years pruning, business, health wise, all the different things that, you have your goals in your life and your journey, and none of them are the same. But I,
Mhm.
I came to a plateau, and then I started to go down, and I'm like, why am I going down? Because I'm trying so hard and I'm good at what I do and all of these things. And then all of a sudden I realized that there's people in my life that I let stay in there because I've known them for so long, or because we had some history way back when, or because, and if you don't examine, like, well, how does that work today? Because the good and the bad about humans is that we could change just like that. And
Yep.
it's the good news, because if you're having a terrible life, you can decide, okay, right now it's going to change, and it can
Mhm.
change right now. But the bad news is you can be having a good life, and then you start collecting barnacles, I call them, bad habits, bad energies, bad people, bad whatever. And all of a sudden you don't notice them. They're still there. And you keep them around because, well, I don't know, they've been around for so long. They're comfortable.
Yep.
The enemy, I guess, is comfortable, whatever it is. But when you start getting honest, and that's when things get rough. Like when you do
Yep.
your soul fragment healing, that's all about honesty. That's all about, mostly it's about being honest with yourself. And
Yep.
and that's the hardest part. And you have to admit that I've made bad choices, or I made choices that were good at the time and they're no longer good. It doesn't matter where you get the information from, but if you're honest about things, and then you start weighing out, like, as a healer, and we're all healers in some capacity, because that's why we're having these conversations. Like you said,
Yep.
you want to give, you want to help. But then what happens when you start to turn that frequency on is, first of all, the cats and mice come to feed because they're hungry. And
Mhm.
that's what they do. They eat what they find. And so then you find that, the things that in your perfect world would be happening happen less and less, because the rats and mice are coming around more. And you're
Yep.
just feeding them, and then they tell their friends, and next thing you're being eaten alive by, ticks, if you will. Um,
Yep.
and then you got to learn to pick them off, and then you can start to heal, and then you can get back to doing what you're doing. And I think there's some really good advice. I think that if I learned anything over the last couple of years, I tell people now, I say, well, I'm not going to do that because I love you, but you know what? I love me too. And
Mhm.
as soon as I started acknowledging that I love me too, then I wouldn't behave that way. I wouldn't let you do that to me, because I care about me too. And people mistake kindness for weakness all the time, and they
Yep.
mistake sacrifice for a good or bad heart, depending on, who's making and receiving the sacrifice. And that they have nothing to do with each other. And a lot of times it's just really just science. Like, if I'm going to let you into my world, then logic would say that there should be something that we both benefit from it. And if you're just taking from me, then that's not sustainable, because eventually you'll take everything I have, and then I'll have nothing, and then you'll move on to take it from somebody else. And that's
Yep.
if you're honest about that, then you go, well, of course. And one of the things that I've discovered, and I try to like flip the switch and say, well, we can always have good answers for everybody else, right? Like when somebody comes to you with a problem, they go, oh, Erin, I don't know what to do. I got this problem. And you look at them, you go, oh, you're going to be okay, because here's the obvious answer, because I see it, because
Mhm.
I'm not you. But then you
Yep.
turn around and you do the same thing to yourself, and you don't, all of a sudden magically you don't see those same things you see in somebody else. And that,
Yeah.
I think the biggest change that I discovered was I just say, well, let me go put that under the lens of I'm somebody else. And then all of a sudden, different answers, different choices, different solutions have been coming up. So I think that's
Definitely.
fantastic information. And as I knew would happen, we're going to blow through a half an hour just like that. Um, but
Yeah.
frankly, it's been really great to get back to talking with you. And I certainly hope that we can do more of this and
Of course.
and get into exploring some of these solutions and methods. And just to me, it's just fascinating to talk to people that are willing to go down roads that not everybody wants to go down, and willing to try things and see if they work, and try things that work and build on it, because most people are stuck in their little boxes, and they're afraid of what they don't know, or they mask something they don't know with something that they're afraid of.
Exactly. Yep.
And I don't know, I don't think it helps anybody. And you know, I follow a lot of the same methodology, just with different tools and techniques. And so I like to see how it all weaves together. Seems to make a really nice tapestry.
It does.
Awesome. Well, Erin, it's been an absolute pleasure. And once again, how does somebody find you if they're looking?
Check out my website, and then if texting is the best way if anybody needs to reach me, but email as well. And yeah, here for everybody.
Fantastic. And your link is right connected to the
Yep.
episode, and so all your details are there. Thank you, Erin. It's
Perfect.
been a pleasure,
Thank
and I
you.
look forward to talking to you again soon.
All righty. Take care.